Thank you for joining us this morning for our session on winning with industry-specific app advisory. We have an incredibly knowledgeable panel for you this morning, and we'll do a quick one round of introductions just so you know who's here. So, given that I'm speaking at the moment, I will kick off. My name is Will Farnell. I'm founder of a firm called Farnell Clark. We're based in Norwich in Norfolk, and I'm also one of the co-founders of App Advisory Plus, which is a combination of directory helpline support for accounting firms to deliver profitable app advisory services to their clients. As you can see on the slide there, we have an esteemed panel. We'll work through in the order we've got here. So Grace, do you want to just give a quick intro?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Grace Thompson. I'm the Partnerships Manager at Re-Leased. So Re-Leased is a Xero and QuickBooks online integrated property management software solution for commercial and mixed property portfolios. So I work with accounting firms across the UK who are keen to work proactively to modernise their property clients' businesses. Excellent.
Thank you, Grace. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Will. So I'm John Horton. I work for a company called Unleashed Software. We have a #1 Xero app for product businesses, and we help those businesses make, manage, and move their products more effectively. I lead the partnerships team across the UK, EMEA, and North America, and our team works with like hundreds of partners, most of which are forward-thinking accountants, and we help them to support them and also their clients make the move to cloud systems.
Thank you, John. And James.
Good morning, everybody. My name is James Hickey. I'm the Channel Sales Manager for Figured for the UK and Ireland. Figured is a financial management tool for farms, agri-assets, land estates. We primarily work with accounting firms right across the UK, land agents, advisors, and also banks. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. And finally, Jamie.
Thanks, Will. So yeah, my name's Jamie Eddy. Morning, everybody. I was an accountant for about 13 years prior to joining Xero a couple of years ago, and have now just taken on the role of the verticals lead. So looking at how we can best make use of Xero within specific industry sectors, working with apps and looking at Xero in general. So yeah, pretty pleased to be here. So.
Excellent. Thank you. And before we hand back to you, Jamie, if we just have a quick look at what we're going to cover during the session this morning in terms of our agenda. I think we've got a slide.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, guys. So I'm going to hand back to Jamie in a moment, because if we think about the reason we're here, we're talking about apps today, and I think it's fair to say that without Xero's foresight to recognize the power of the platform, many of the apps that are here talking this morning and many others that are not wouldn't exist in the form that they do. So it's going to be really interesting to get a view from Jamie in terms of how Xero facilitated the ecosystem that exists and provides so much power to us as accountants to support our clients. So Jamie's going to touch on that in a moment with an introduction, and then we're going to talk about some of the opportunities with industry-specific app solutions, and that conversation is going to really revolve around kind of 3 core areas: challenges around change. How do we drive change to make our teams aware, make clients aware of what's possible with this technology, how we build the industry expertise to be able to have those credible conversations, and really wrapping up in terms of what's the opportunity. So for you as the accountancy firm, what does the opportunity look like? How do we capitalize on it? How do we capture that opportunity? So that's the plan for the session. We'll have time for questions and things at the end as well. So to kick off, I'm going to hand over to Jamie, who's going to kind of set the scene a little bit here in terms of what the app ecosystem is all about. Over to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Will. So yeah, hopefully you've all at some point managed to stumble across the app marketplace in Xero, and I could wax lyrical about Xero all day, and I obviously work for them, so you should hope I can do that. But one of my favorite features in practice as well is the ability to be able to connect to these ecosystem partners and be able to have streamlined data flows throughout all of them. And I've worked in the past with Re-Leased, Unleashed, and Figured. So yeah, I know how well that flow sort of works. And then if we just move on to the next slide, I guess the whole vision around the piece, dating way back to when Xero was sort of conceived many years ago, was having a single ledger solution and then being able to layer information on top of it and streamline the whole flow of data from the outset all the way through to looking at how can we get the best information out of the data that we've got, rather than having to down tools or send backups away and all of that sort of stuff, and being able to look at that whole piece in real time and in various different products by having this open API connection, and then looking at improving on that year on year, and just allowing small businesses to manage their day-to-day stuff, and also for the accounting partners being able to get visibility on that data at any time during the year, and being able to provide any advice, rather than the older way I guess we used to do things. And if we move on to the next slide, the reason that I guess one of the reasons I love the ecosystem so much is that it benefits all parties involved, and as it says there, the opportunities are endless. So the small business, looking at our surveys over the recent years, most of these numbers are pretty consistent, but when 90%, we got 90% connected to Advisor, and the apps or the clients that are using those apps have 30% growth when using them compared to those that don't. So it really does benefit those businesses by making use of these apps and improving either the data flow into Xero or looking at better reporting coming out of Xero. And then for accounting advisors as well, 60% growth, revenue growth when you advise on apps on top of just cloud advice in general. So looking into this space and industry specific stuff in general is really key. And then just running through a couple of the things we've got, I guess, to help you with your client base. So looking at, if we can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Grace. Looking at within the Explorer section within Xero, if you haven't delved in there too deeply or anything, it's the quickest place to go and update any of the industry data that you've got. But you can get a whole piece on all of your clients and look at, like I've dealt with quite a few firms that didn't know they had niches in certain areas like retail clients, and realize then when they've looked at this screen how many they actually do have. So it's a really useful tool to go in and look at that. And then if we skip through, you can see a few of the other screens. So that's just looking broadly at the industry stuff, and then when we delve into the specific industry, you'll then be able to see the apps that are specifically paired to those apps. So you can see, like in that screen as an example, there are a couple of clients at the top that don't have any of the apps, and we can look to cross sell some of that across our industry sector. And then moving on to the last screen, we can also look at the apps as well to see who we've got connected to which apps and what the number of them are. So it's a really great place to segment your client base that are currently on Xero, and having a look at which apps are connected and who doesn't, to look at what benefits we can provide them as well. And then just moving on to the next screen, looking at some of the other assets we've got, because we know, like app advisory in general, right? There's 900 plus apps on the marketplace, and it becomes harder the later on you start to look at it. So we've created these app advisory playbooks to sort of help break that down a little bit. So we started initially with an app advisory playbook and 3 industry specific ones. So looking at retail, e-commerce, trading, construction, and also professional services. And we've then since been adding to that with a cash flow playbook. And we've also got an agriculture one and a hospitality one as well, which has just been launched. And it really does help break down like some of the bigger apps in the space, and also like little cheat sheets and things like that, helping with how do you profile clients and looking at all of that important stuff at the outset of any app project. And then moving on to the next screen, you'll see like a brief outset of one of the train construction pages. So looking at some of the apps that integrate within Xero and breaking down what's on the marketplace, so you can look at them at side-by-side comparison a little bit easier. And then we move on. Look, this is like, I guess, when you're looking at some of the bigger projects that you might not have capacity or scope to be able to deliver, or is not a repeatable process within your firm. So like looking at the Xero app integrator program, so there's a few specific integrators there that you can reach out to, and they'll hopefully be able to help you with with any bigger project, so one that could take months or whatever, or it's just, like I said, isn't a repeatable process. So it's definitely worth checking that out as well. And then getting some of the more interesting stuff around what I'm hoping to do within the vertical space from my end, and looking at one of the things we've done previously. So we've created like an agri resource center, which is quite apt considering we've obviously got Figured on the corner. If we just jump onto the next screen, you'll see some of this is the web page, and then we move on. You'll be able to see like a bundle of all of the resources. So there's videos on there with case studies, and we've looked at how you get set up with Xero and Figured, and loads of different resources to be able to access. One of the other things that that I've just launched as well is a Xero landlord campaign. So looking at how we can best make use of Xero for landlords, but specifically for the advisor as well. So yeah, keen to get even more of this information out over the coming year and beyond, to see how we can sort of help break this space down a little bit easier for you. So that's me setting the scene on, I guess, app ecosystem in general, and then also some of the stuff we're looking to do in the vertical space specifically. So I'm going to hand back over to Will, and we'll get into some more of the juicy detail.
Thanks, Jamie. And I mean, that's great. There, certainly on that screen, we can see there some of the kind of marketing tools and stuff that are available. I'm sure we're going to get into some of that conversation over the next kind of half an hour or so as we pick up some of the specific points here in terms of how do we do this? How do we go about identifying clients that we can help with app advisory? How do we kind of tell them what we're doing? So some of these marketing tools and stuff there look really helpful. So thank you for that. Right, let's get into the discussion and bring some of the panel into this as well. So app advisory is kind of a new thing, isn't it? I mean, my firm, we were doing cloud stuff 10 years ago, and people kind of looked at us in a weird way and thought, what on earth are you doing that for? And I think perhaps to a point we're kind of still in that really kind of early adopter stage with app advisory. So why is everybody not doing it? What are the challenges that you guys are seeing from accounting firms in terms of how they go about introducing app advisory, how they position it to their clients? So we've got a slide here that kind of perhaps gives a hint of some of the answers to this question. But let's jump in on that question. John, what are you seeing? What are firms struggling with?
So change management is so big, obviously. There's so many schools of thought. I think it actually boils down to action and being a bit proactive. Like sometimes I see firms trying to kind of paint this picture of perfection, and it can often get in the way of some of the progress. So I think really it all starts by incremental improvements, these marginal gains. And one of the things like we've noticed is like whether or not the accountant is actually being proactive with their clients, or whether or not the clients are coming directly, the clients like need products like Re-Leased or like Unleashed to solve the problems that they've got. So quite often it just starts out with a simple conversation. You just need to understand actually what the client is doing and how they do it, and asking these open questions. And I think it goes back to a slight fear that like accountants do just numbers, and actually they don't normally get involved with the operational side of the business. I think it's just about asking more questions, like what's important to the client.
Yeah, and I think that's a big topic, isn't it? And probably not one for this webinar, but something to consider in terms of how much of this is genuinely about the changing role of the accountant and what clients' expectations are in terms of what we're delivering now. And it's probably the same that Xero saw in the early days in terms of clients coming to the accountant saying, hey, I've seen this Xero thing and I want to do it, and the accountants go, yeah, okay, that's fine. And perhaps we've got the same kind of challenges here. So James, I mean, don't be kind of directed by the change management slide here necessarily, but what are you guys seeing in terms of particularly working in the sector that you do? I hear it all the time. Yeah, farmers, they don't want to change. What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Will. I think the first thing to acknowledge is that change is really hard, particularly in the space, and you've got to step towards it. You're quite right. Farmers are probably sometimes mislabeled as being been slow to move. So we see in a lot of instances, in the background I've got, and we're dealing with a relatively conservative industry in terms of technology adoption, and that's what it's sometimes seen as within a potentially conservative accounting firm. So it's doubly hard. The difference we've seen here is you can't let it be client-led. So quite often farmers from an agricultural context, and I'm sure many other industries, are busy getting on with their day jobs. They leave up to their advisors for them to show them what's available. They don't know what they don't know. There's an element of, we don't want to be seen recommending something or recommending a service around a potential solution that we're not complete experts in. I think what we see amongst those accounting firms is those that really identify themselves as agricultural specialists using agricultural specialist workflow or tool. There's becoming a much more of a disparity between those who are generalists who offer an agri solution but aren't willing to make the change to really identify that as a specialist sector. Again, I think from all of us, and we all know each other from a sort of solutions, and I think to really identify the same accounting firms or the same advisors, we will probably identify the same 10 or 20 who do this really well. And I think that's really important to extend.
Yeah, excellent. And Grace, what's your experience of the challenges that firms are facing? Why is everybody not doing this? Because it seems so obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the challenge of a kind of duality of internal and external change management that's required. So there is the change management that's required internally within a firm for people to just upskill their staff or engage themselves to be able to confidently go into these conversations with clients, as John said, without fear of it having to be absolutely perfect, but with the pursuit of progress. And then on the other side of that, it's much alike to Figured, within the property space, a lot of those businesses are quite behind on technology and tech adoption. So it's helping those clients to also understand that times are changing, technology is moving on, and that they need to be ready to embrace change to really go into this next chapter. And doing both at the same time can be quite challenging, but actually it can be a really productive learning process, I think, for everyone. And I think the more that you do it, the easier it is to adapt to that change.
Yeah, perfect. And Jamie, as you just duck down there, I mean, you highlighted in your intro some of the things that Xero are doing to kind of make accountants aware of what's possible here. Any thoughts from you in terms of what some of the barriers are and why firms are slower to kind of picking up and doing this kind of stuff, beyond the fact that it's just hard and it's not what they normally do?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard and it's not what they normally do. But one of the things when we looked at doing it within practice, and we had the beauty of me being the sole person, so we had a dedicated resource to delve into it and to get more stuck into looking at the app side of things. And I often find, especially working on like the cloud projects at Xero and things like that resource and buying from above is sometimes the bigger thing. So like not having the best will and intentions in the world to be able to deliver on something that you want to do, but you just haven't got resource or the day job gets in the way. So being able to actually have somebody dedicated to looking at this is one of the great advantages that you can sort of get over. And then a lot of it, I think a lot of the time we forget that there are humans on the other side of a business, and we think about cost savings and things like that. Like I've been involved in a conversation with a big firm around making use of Re-Leased, for example, in a property space, and they immediately said the client wouldn't pay for it without even bringing it up as a discussion, which I always find absolutely fascinating, because if somebody else brought it up down the road, you'd be like, why hasn't my advisor mentioned that?
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point you've made there, actually. And I talk to firms about it a lot in terms of how much our own mindsets kind of stop us making stuff happen, even down to those conversations that we have with firms about moving clients from desktop to the cloud. And it's like, oh yeah, our client won't do that. And actually the way that I generally respond on that is that our clients pay us to give them advice. So that they've made that decision, they pay us to give us the advice because they trust us. So 95% of the time, I'm sure, if the accountant says, hey, Mr. Client, I think you should do X, because the likelihood is they're going to do it. So so much of it is us kind of holding ourselves back and making decisions and having preconceptions about what a client will and won't do. So I think that's a really valid point. The other point you made there, Jamie, that I think is really relevant and leads us nicely on to kind of the next question, was around kind of a champion. But the challenge, I think, with having a tech champion, an app champion, or whatever, that I've seen talking to firms is they find somebody who's generally younger and they like tech, so they say you can be the tech champion, but they don't reduce their utilization targets or anything else, and they don't give them any budget, but they've ticked the box because they've got an app champion. So I'm sure we can explore that. But in terms of, we've talked about the challenges, we've said what are the things that stop accountants doing this. From your collective experiences, what are the things that the firms that are doing this successfully, what are they doing that means it's successful for them that others are not doing? So Grace, I'll come to you first on that one. So to kind of reiterate, the firms that are doing this really well, what are they doing? What sets them apart?
Yeah, really interesting. Actually, leading on from your point about having a sort of tech champion, I think specifically in the industry specific space, it's quite different to implementing, a series of horizontal apps that are going to sort of help with the account space. These are sort of tailored solutions with specific functionality for specific business needs in sectors. So I think that we've already touched upon some of the challenges of having so many apps on the market, and then some of the internal challenges of people not quite having the bandwidth to commit their time to this. What I would say is when it works really well, I think is where firms do dedicate a bit of time in building relationships and building trust with these industry-specific app advisors who are able to really offer insight into the industry. For example, at Re-Leased, the firms we work really closely with are the firms that I have a really good relationship with, and actually we take a very collaborative and consultative approach to each of their clients, and there's that trust that's built there, and they know our team, they know our sales team, and they know that they're speaking on every single day to businesses who are in the exact same position as their clients and who can actually offer really tangible advice about how they can improve their systems. So I think it's not trying to do everything. The ones who do it really well are the ones who don't try to do everything and who understand that their expertise is on the accounting side, our expertise is on the property software side. So why not combine our expertise and actually do this really collaboratively to find the best solution for our clients?
Yeah. So just I don't know the kind of the experience and knowledge of the people on the call today. So just as a setup for that, when we talk about kind of horizontal and vertical apps, we're talking about the horizontal apps being the receipt banks, the auto entries, the go cardless, the payment tools that will work across a whole cross section of your client base. What our focus is today is on those vertical apps, so those that relate to a specific industry sector. And we've got property, we've got inventory, we've got farming on the call today. So just being clear in terms of perhaps the easiest stuff is the horizontals, the stuff that have got to create the foundations to what we do with apps. The extension to this and the real opportunity to differentiate what you're doing as a firm is moving into these vertical industry sectors. So just to kind of give some context to that. So James, coming to you, what are you seeing in terms of the firms that are nailing this?
Yeah, thanks very much, Will. Probably there's sort of two or three things that come to mind, I think, to echo what Grace and Jamie have said. I think from an agricultural specific perspective, it's crucial in that you extend the internal team beyond either the cloud-based app team or in our context, the agricultural team. I think they both bring different strengths, but it has to be across both. We don't see Figured's projects where Figured's rolled out be successful when that is siloed within a firm. So that's really, really important. I think secondly as well, it's really important to remember that we are, at the end of the day, software vendors. We do what we do in our minds really, really well. All we do is agricultural financial management. So that's great, but we spend most of our time not selling to a firm or not selling to a business, but actually advising on building up the service around that. I think that's absolutely crucial, particularly in the way we work, It's less so what Figure does, although we think we're sort of best in class in providing that service. It's building that service around that. So that's pushing for that either efficiency internally in terms of that time of motion, what can be generated, or that value add work, which is the interesting part. And we see the firms who put more time into what's the service we can build off the back of this, in terms of we can take to our clients or improve their lives. And we see that being really, really successful, as opposed to we've suggested this, they've bought it, and it's set and forget. That's really, really difficult to pull off. So it's those who can build a really strong service around a tool like a Figure, or someone who does something sort of industry specific.
Yeah, so that's about having clarity over what your client mix is,
Yes.
and thinking carefully about what's the route to having that conversation with that group of clients. What is it we're delivering? Articulating clearly the benefits and the value of adopting these kind of tools. Is that a fair summary of that, James?
Yeah, it is. I think, again, from an agricultural context, we're quite specific in that you either tend to work with agricultural clients or you don't. So if you do, they tend to be quite parochial. So straight away you get caught out if you sort of not come to something they can't see derived value. Farmers are tactile people, right? Like they've got to touch things. Yep. So for Figure, you've really got to show them a demonstrable value or an output, as opposed to blue sky, I think you can do X, Y, Z. But you've got to, if you go in confidence, hopefully tools like ours, because we're so specific, we are in that vertical, we can sort of provide some impetus to those conversations where we're not just a generalist tool.
Yeah, great. John, so what are you seeing at Unleashed? What are your successful firms, partner firms, doing well?
I mean, it's so vast. Like, I think it's been a while coming. I don't think like we've been an overnight success. I've been with Unleashed for 2 years, and I'd say during that time, like the firms that have done really well have been the firms that have been the early adopters. You know, they were first people like Farnell Clark, the first people who had started using cloud accounting software. You'd gone through kind of that horizontal stage, and you'd understood the benefits to clients, like the mass clients. And then the next logical step would be to look at, well, who's left? And it's all, like we always say, it's like the hard ones, you know, like it's like they're a service business, or maybe it is agricultural, or obviously in our case, it's somebody's got inventory, and they're always those like little sticklers who are still on like Sage 50 Professional. And it's the people who have looked at that list. They understand that by using Xero, they're going to get the operational efficiencies of horizontal apps, but actually they can't move this particular client because they are on the Sage 50, and Sage 50 Professional's got a feature that maybe Xero doesn't have. And I think it goes back to the point of understanding, really, is as soon as you understand what they're using, how they're using some of their processes, then actually we can start to have that initial conversation. So I don't think like overnight accountants are suddenly going to become kind of Unleashed experts or Released experts. It's a case of like making that first step, really. And we've got loads of tools, loads of guides that can help them do that. But yeah, I think it is definitely about an education piece. Yeah,
perfect. And big question here, because the whole point of firms wanting to do this is to generate new revenue. So what's the process? I mean, I know different apps work differently in terms of whether, from a pure software license point of view, whether you're passing licenses on at a discounted cost. Where's the value for the firm in terms of saying, right, I want to work with Re-Leased, I want to work with Figured, because there's a revenue opportunity for me here. Where does, in each of your kind of offerings, just to give some perspective in terms of different approaches, where's the opportunity for the firms to generate the revenue? Grace, if we take Re-Leased, I mean, where do you see the opportunity for firms to create revenue from working with you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at Re-Leased, we don't sell licenses to firms. Licenses are all held by the property businesses who use us. But the real benefit is that when property businesses are using Re-Leased and Xero together, we're able to pull that data from the platform to produce these really detailed property reporting dashboards that enable accountants to sort of benchmark their clients' performances across the industry, which really taps into this huge opportunity to cross-sell advisory services. So there's all this talk at the moment about the automation of compliance and wanting to shift into advisory services, but especially within the property sector, there's this enormous gap of actually having the data to be able to do that. But when you've got your clients using integrated cloud, obviously you then have access to that live data, and the sort of reporting and the sort of strategic advice that our partners can give to their clients by virtue of them using, Re-Leased and Xero together, is pretty momentous for not only the clients' businesses, but also, the fees that these firms can be charging for these services.
Yeah, perfect. And James, how does your proposition differ from that of Grace's?
Yes, slightly different there, Will, but same, also quite similar, I guess. So we, most of the revenue that our firms work with us is generated based off a service they can provide using our software. So all of our licenses, with only a few exceptions, are actually held by an accounting firm or by an advisory body as opposed to the farmer, the end user. I'd say in a large proportion of cases, the farmer might not even know they're on Figured. They'll just see that they're getting better outputs and a better service or better deliverables based off the core accounting platform. We do have a partnership program, and there's incentives around that, particularly useful for some larger firms. But fundamentally for us, it's the service that's provided and built around the Figured platform. Just at that point around those Grace, you can see market difference across our benchmarking tool as well, around those clients where you're actually starting to advise on, building out a budget, maybe beyond just the management accounts. And again, we've got a advisory playbook which helps you step through into that, so it can be a little bit less scary.
Yeah, great. And John, you and I have had a slightly different angle for you. You and I have had this conversation before about all inventory. It's really difficult, and accountants shouldn't be doing inventory implementations themselves. So where's the revenue opportunity, and is that true?
Yeah, so that's not true. It's not really complicated. It obviously can be really complicated. So like there's three areas really. There's like migration services. So as you would migrate anybody to Xero, you can absolutely migrate people to Unleashed as well. We're obviously there to support you, so I'm not kind of saying you just pick up Unleashed and run with it, but certainly there's migration services there. As the others have said, like a better visibility of reporting, so wrapping up kind of your monthly management reports, quarterly management reports, and then the final piece would be around the operational efficiency. So obviously, like back ends are going to be improved, so you're going to have that efficiency there, that time saving there. It will also give you visibility to like the Unleashed data. So like all of our partners have access to their clients' data. So from month to month, they'll be able to do, like the monthly reconciliations are made a lot easier rather than shelling, backups to and fro like you do with Sage or with spreadsheets. So efficiency.
Perfect. And Jamie, besides obviously all of the firms that are doing this successfully are going to be using HQ Explorer to identify the sectors that their clients are operating in and looking at the tools that clients are using. We've certainly had it before where we've kind of looked at Explorer and seen clients are using a product that we didn't know they were using, and it's like, where did that come from? Why didn't they talk to us first? So besides those obvious things, I mean, anything else that you see that these leading firms are doing really well that others should be thinking about?
Like making sure that I think we touched on it briefly earlier, not siloing the whole thing to a cloud team and leaving it be. Like if everybody's pulling in the same direction, whoever's having, like the biggest thing we had in terms of getting apps in was like you might be having as a manager or a partner having a conversation with a client who hasn't been through a recent pain point that you might be looking to alleviate with an app. So but somebody who might have been asking queries or whatever could have had a conversation at that very moment, and being able to feed that through to the right people is a massive thing, because we had quite a few things off the back of that where some of our junior members of the team were just asking some queries, and they might have been going through some pain points around chasing debt as an example or whatever. And a couple of days later when we spoke to them, they might not have had that issue. So being able to lean on that is one of the things that makes it quite successful when looking to implement apps in terms of selling as well, like being able to show how you can make a difference with said app. And then, like you said, you don't look at HQ, see where you can repeat a process, because then it makes it a lot more efficient in terms of a revenue gain. And if it's more niche, then look at somebody from outside that might be able to help you.
Yeah, perfect. So before we tackle the $1 million question in terms of, well, how do I do it? How do I go about finding an opportunity? If anybody's got any questions at all so far, pop them into the Q&A box, and we will get to those very shortly. But as I say, $1 million question now. So firms that are not involved yet or are struggling to get into industry-specific app advisory, where do they start? So where do they start in terms of identifying opportunities to engage with clients around apps? Besides the obvious things we talked about using Explorer and everything else, but what's the process? Where do they start? James, I'll come to you first on that one. So accountant says, right, we've got to do this. We've got a bunch of clients that are in this sector. What do they do first?
Yeah, thanks, Will. So the way we work is sort of in two tranches, really. So just to pick up a point from the earlier as well, I think quite often where tools like Figured or Re-Leased is used is sometimes where the cup for the horse. So maybe you've got a lot of clients who want to go on Xero. You want to put on Xero, but you can't because they've got idiosyncrasies within the industry. And sometimes we can use Figured or Re-Leased or an Unleashed that might get them onto the Xero platform, which allows for that increased efficiency at a larger scale. But in terms of where to start, from a Figured context, I think look internally. If you go and ask who wants to, sign up with this, again, from a farming context, farmers are tactile people that like to see outputs first. I'd start with internal clients, the ones you do your bookkeeping for. Run a really controlled pilot with those. There'll always be those clients that come to you first looking for these solutions, which can be dangerous if you're not across them. So in our minds, with permission, start internally, drive outputs, then you can demonstrate those outputs rather than it be, again, sort of all hypothetical. Fundamentally, if you list, say, industry such as agriculture or property or whatever it is on your website as a specialist sector, it should be more than just the year-end accounts for that particular sector, particularly in farming, where the majority of our clients, there is fundamental idiosyncrasies that happen on farm that maybe don't sit inside a financial year. But yeah, start internally, build up that competence. I think most large firms in the UK would have some element of Figured within them now, and they will just continue to run with that. But yes, take outputs. You always got to show outputs when you're dealing with these clients.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, James. John, what do you reckon? So where do firms start? What's the baseline?
Well, interesting stat, maybe or maybe not. Like 3/4 of all of our Unleashed clients, they come directly to us rather than going through their accountant and an accountant introducing them to us. So like we know there's a massive opportunity. Like if 3 out of 4 clients are coming to us directly, then there's obviously something missing because they're already Googling for it. So I'd say from our perspective, because we work with manufacturers, wholesalers and distributors, i.e. product businesses, the first thing to do is to look at that base. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're a sole practitioner or you're one of the top 4 firms in the country, invariably you'll have somebody using some element of inventory. And it's about starting that conversation with that client. And you don't have to read like massive playbooks or go on courses to have these change management knowledge conversations. Like it simply is just asking questions about their business. What do they do? How do they do it? What are some of the tools they're using internally? And with those few questions, you're obviously going to get a lot of knowledge back. So I think it's just identifying which clients in your base are one of those types of business, and then starting the initial conversation with them. And that could be at a client manager level. It doesn't need to be somebody specialist in the cloud team.
Yeah, that 3 out of 4 is really interesting because I know certainly John, because I've talked about this with you before in terms of my own view of kind of cloud adoption, particularly in the UK market, which I kind of put about 20% of accounting firms in the UK that are kind of doing this stuff reasonably well. I'm not saying brilliantly, but reasonably well, and that kind of fits, doesn't it? I know it's 20%, so it's a fifth rather than a quarter, but it kind of shows, doesn't it, that the opportunity out there is huge for those firms that are doing this to actually kind of use this still as a USP, and the fact that they're doing something that the vast majority of the market are not doing, and we kind of operate, those firms that are doing this stuff, we do operate in a bubble, and we just assume that everybody else is doing it, and they're not. And it's really important that we recognize that and use it to our advantage. Grace, what's your thoughts? Where do firms start in terms of making the most of this opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to hear the parallels from John and James, because just like John, the vast majority of Re-Leased clients actually come to us directly as well. So I think there's a great starting point is kind of breaking away from this linear way of thinking that you have to have, Xero implemented and that done. I mean, James touched upon it. Re-Leased does often act as a catalyst to move these property businesses who maybe have been working in one way for 10, 15 years, into a more modern way of working. So yeah, breaking away from the idea that it has to be sorting out the accounts piece, and then the next step is industry specific apps. It actually is often kind of the other way around. And I think, yeah, leaning upon the expertise, if you do have a particular sector that is really jumping out as a specialism for your firm, I think it's really important to invest some time in exploring that sector and the apps available, and really familiarizing yourself with the products on the market, so that you can go and sort of further segment the clients that you have within that sector. And then, as the other guy said, finding some pilot clients and just building your confidence, and working really collaboratively with the industry specific apps to find those early successes. And then I can't speak for Unleashed or Figured, but I mean, at Re-Leased, we pour quite a lot of energy into co-branded marketing. So what we'll do is we can create, really compelling case studies that can then be used to go and speak to other clients, not only within the property sector, but within other sectors as well, to really demonstrate a firm's expertise and how they've managed to successfully digitally transform some of their clients' businesses. So I think that's probably all I'd say on that one.
Perfect. And I'll pick up on one of the points you made earlier about data and the ability to use data for advisory. And I think if I'm kind of throwing my 2 pennies worth in here in terms of where the opportunities are, where to start, it always starts with data. And I'm a really big advocate of kind of trying to make sure that accountants are doing regular bookkeeping for their clients, to make sure there's accurate, up-to-date, meaningful data, and everything that all of you are doing is the extension to that data, isn't it? It's about taking that core bookkeeping data and making it sector specific to be able to add those real value points to the client. So for me, it's still that get the foundations right, get the data quality right, because that's when you generate the added value, the added revenue opportunities of working with guys like you. And you've said that the resources are there. The marketing is there. Everything else is there for firms to kind of grab hold of, run with, use it, and add more value to their clients, which is fundamentally what we're here to do. Jamie, anything to add on this one from a Xero perspective in terms of what you're seeing? Where do people start?
I think one of the biggest things that James mentioned was, like, if you start internally, not only does it help build up your expertise, but it also arms you with loads of case studies, and you can make use of the data that we've all talked about. And then actually turning data into a story is what is going to create an emotive response to anybody else externally. Not only are you an expert in using said app and an expert in the area, but you've then got all of the data to back up why this is such a great solution and why it's a great idea for everybody else within that vertical to get involved in. And you're just naturally more confident talking about it, rather than like, oh, we know of this app that we think you might want to get involved in. Like, just all sounds a bit woolly. Whereas if you can give tangible evidence as to how it's going to change their life, then that's going to be the biggest driver. And with a lot of these, like the Xero stuff, as sexy as I think Xero is, not a lot of people find bookkeeping overly sexy. Whereas a lot of people are going to be more excited about these things because, like, working with people within factories and Unleashed and things like that, that's what they're doing day to day. They're not really interested in the Xero stuff. It's going to be the things that impact their day to day life that is going to drive that forward. So being able to create those data stories is invaluable.
Yeah, perfect. So we're 1:45, so we're edging towards the end. So my final question for each of you before we go to Q&A, it's that question that everybody loves. So what's the top tip? So for firms that are looking to introduce industry sector specific apps, or those thinking about doing so, what's your number one top tip? And feel free to kind of make it generic, make it focused on your sector, whatever works best for you. John, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah. So mine would probably be a shameless plug for our own playbook. Like Jamie mentioned, there's awesome playbooks out there that they've got, and we noticed that there was a gap there, that there wasn't one kind of covering inventory and manufacturing in a great deal. And there are a lot of clients, like we think it's probably about 10% of clients have got some form of stock. So we write our own playbook, and that playbook goes through step by step exactly the types of business. It's got real life examples of businesses in there who hopefully would resonate with the types of clients that accountants are talking to, like what benefits they had. It's got like a sample like scoping doc where you can go through some of the questions I mentioned earlier and how to kind of gain a lot of confidence with actually working with these types of businesses. So yeah, shameless plug obviously, but like take a look at that. It genuinely is a really useful resource which probably took us maybe 12 months to put together, so really valuable.
Excellent, thank you, John. Jamie, I'll come over to you now. What's big tip? What's top tip from you?
For me, it's remember that all of your clients are human. Their motivators might be entirely different. The way I tend to break it down is most people are interested in time or money because they're the most valuable resources. Right? Is the time saving going to be the thing that drives somebody? Like I've had conversations with people who are like, oh, it's going to cost them X% and they get the money in or whatever already. But actually, if it's going to give them hours back in their day, like I worked with a butcher who 80% of their business we managed to put on direct debit, and then every Friday goes and plays golf, doesn't want to spend any more time in the business, happy with how much money it earns, but now he can play golf on a Friday. So like everybody's motivator is entirely different, and you'll only get that with having those conversations with those clients.
Excellent. James, top tip.
Yeah, to just start. The barriers to entry for tools like ours, based on the very nature that coming from a success base, are fairly low. Just start, identify again internal clients. Don't go looking around for who's asked or for an external need. Just start internally, build up that competence. We're pretty nice people here. All we do is implement Figured within a business, so we think we know what we're doing. But just start, and you'll find we're not trying to create another task here, or it might be another solution, but in a roundabout way, we're sort of providing you with more time rather than to learn one. So just get going.
Cool. And Grace, finally from you, what's your top tip?
Yeah, I think it's coming from the property industry, which is probably quite traditional compared to other industries. I think it's being sort of hyper aware of the changes that are happening with regards to technology and industries, and having always viewing things from a sort of growth mindset of, what can we learn, what can we change, and appreciating, as we've all seen this year, that no industry is resistant to shocks. I think people always thought, commercial property was really stable, and then look what's happened in the last year with people kind of deferring rents and not being able to, not quite the sound assets that they might have been a year ago. So I think being able to kind of embrace change and invest in that personal development for themselves will just give them kind of the flexibility and the agility to succeed both for their clients, but also for their firm.
Perfect. Excellent. So thank you all for those. In terms of from myself, I've mentioned importance of data. So focus on getting that data right. In terms of thinking about apps, naturally, I would urge you to take a look at what we're doing with App Advisory Plus in terms of providing a platform for education, content, and all of the apps here are represented on the platform. So take a look at their pages and case studies and so on there. Questions. Let me just question here. How to price advisory services. So we talked about monetization. How do firms monetize app advisory. Anybody wish to take the chalice here of how do firms go about pricing app advisory services?
Yeah, I'll step into that to begin with, because that's something we do a lot of work on, and something that we've actually built calculators and to, I guess, help justify what that expense is, because quite often that expense, in a figured context anyway, is actually internal cost. So the license cost in some instances might not be passed through the customer. It's really about getting a return on investment. If you're spending 60 or 200 quid a year on a figured license fee, can you then in turn justify that after 6 months to be able to go and generate what's your costing out of a budget or some expert tax advice? It does come down to, again, also identifying those people within the business who should be fulfilling these tasks. Just because you're using, say, a figured license doesn't mean that needs to be a partner who's providing the input into that service. That means you can actually dispel the spread. You can put partner level assumptions into a tool that then can be done by say a more junior member of staff, but sort of those same high level thinking. But we've got calculators you can use in terms of how that can be spelled out. But it does allow for a more even spread from the top-down expertise across the entire business.
Great, and from we've written some articles around this on for App Advisory Plus, and the way we think about this is breaking the whole app advisory process down into chunks, and there's a fact find element that is your it is kind of your own investment into it. It's having a conversation with the client, understanding what their objectives are, what the pain points are. Can technology solve some of those pain points? And at that point, you can start to build clarity around what needs to be done to price things like scoping. So the first step is actually scoping out what the client wants, what the deliverables are. That's a chargeable service. From there, you're going to identify what the suitable tools are. And then you can start getting into charging for analysis of those tools through to implementation. So it's about breaking it down, being clear on the value that you're adding to build that process. And again, we've got templates and things to enable you to produce scoping reports and so on within that. So anybody else got any comments on pricing advisory services that they want to add to my own and James's response, or have we covered that off?
Probably covered from my side. Yeah, I think it's really good advice by you.
Great. Excellent. So no other questions in the Q&A box, and we are heading towards 11 o'clock, so a natural close. So I would like to take the opportunity of thanking you all for joining us this morning. I hope it's useful. I've certainly found it useful, and I think I'm going to go back and check my HQ Explorer and make sure that I'm not missing anything. And I think for me, the single biggest takeaway is the stats that we heard from John and Grace about the number of, or the proportion of clients that are going direct to them as the app vendors. That highlights that we're missing a trick here in terms of identifying these opportunities within our client base. 2021 is going to be a challenging year for us all. We have a ready-made opportunity sitting right in front of us with the clients we're already serving. So use January, because I'm sure nobody's going to be busy doing tax returns or anything else. Use January to take a look at your client base, identify those opportunities to add value through technology, make a difference to your clients. Thank you to the marvelous panel for sharing your insights. I hope it's been useful for everybody, and I'm sure the panel will join me in wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and a very prosperous 2021. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.